Hello. Today I want to draw this version, which is, I think, a very recent version of SpaceX's Starship. It's very large, and this is intended to be the future of space exploration for many people. And I believe this version of the Starship will be capable, from what I've read and seen, it will be capable of transporting dozens of people at once into space, to the moon, to Mars, and elsewhere, and then return them back home, wherever home may be. But I find it very exciting. Now this is a horizontal landscape type photograph. But I want to draw it on a vertical sheet of paper, which is, its dimensions are about 9 by 12 or about 3 by 4. It's almost 9 inches in width and 12 inches tall. Or if you like centimeters, 22.2 by 30.5. Okay, but as you see, this is a horizontal picture. So when I draw it on the sheet of paper, I intend to make it look more like this. In effect, I want to crop out the space most of the space to the left and some to the right. I think an easy way to do that will be to divide this or calibrate this image into thirds as far as the X dimension, left and right. What that will do is it will make it about like this way, and I'm not sure if it will cut off the top and bottom or add to the top and bottom, but I'm not concerned with the top and bottom, the vertical, only the horizontal dimensions as far as calculating the proportions, as far as getting this image on paper. If I took this image and transferred these proportions onto a vertical sheet of paper, you could see that most of this image is sky. That would have to be compressed this way, and then from the ground to the sky, the ground would be way down here, the sky would be up there, and then this rocket or the spacecraft, it takes up about generally a quarter of this horizontal distance. Okay, just imagine, here's about half, and the spaceship is over here, taking up a quarter at its base. Those fins, almost a quarter of the image. Just follow my fingers. We'd go up here, the upper fins would be about here, and the nose cone point would be about there, so we'd have a very skinny rocket. It would look very distorted. So what I want to do is in effect, crop this image so that we're only drawing this. It's what an artist has to do when he or she is considering his canvas or her canvas and how he is going to compose the scene. So, our scene will look more like this. Now, here's another point to consider. Looking at this photograph, we notice that here is the center focus for the lens. All right. This is as straight up and down as I can get it. Notice that there's an angle to the spacecraft. It's not straight up and down. It's kind of the perspective of the camera has kind of seen the base of this spacecraft, which is pretty much evenly built in this dimension. It should be like this pencil. It's straight up and down. Now if I'm a camera looking down here on the ground, looking upward, just like you're under a tall skyscraper or a tall building, you notice that the high point of this building or spacecraft is smaller. It's just how our eyes see perspective. So I thought I might, instead of have it pointing to the left slightly, I might just even it out. I will keep this perspective of the lens shooting this scene from the ground, and the spacecraft the upper part of it will diminish in size a little bit. But the camera person must have been standing pretty far back. It's a huge spacecraft, by the way. Because when the camera is this far back, you still see that you're getting a good representation of the side of the spacecraft. Now you can see these. See the lines, these panels. Down here, they're more straight across without any curve. But as we get higher and higher, noticing the top of this spacecraft, we see that these curves are more defined. There's perspective. If you want to follow this into the distance, you would take a vertical line, intersect it up and down throughout this whole shape, and then going closely, if you're an artist and you've studied perspective, follow this vertical line up and down. You see that these lines, as you go up higher, they angle more downward toward that point along the horizon. See? As we go down, they level out more level, just like the horizon itself. So, even though that point I'm talking about is it would have to be way off here somewhere. That point that extends way off of this image, we can still use that to create these curves to kind of predict the angle of these curves. So keep that in mind. All right. I'm going to crop this. I'm going to try to make it about, well, maybe not a third of the width of the sheet of paper. Probably a little less. Maybe a fifth of the sheet of paper's width. Okay, keep that in mind. Also, the low sun in the sky is shining on the right side of the spacecraft. Now this fin is in shadow. This whole half of the spacecraft is in shadow, and yet you see reflection from the blue sky coming from the left. But we can see that there's a big light in the sky. It's probably the sun that's lighting up this part, this right side of the spacecraft. And I haven't looked at this much, but there's something light down here. There's probably some ground lamps that are shining it onto the base of this spacecraft. Now this black squarish shape over here is not part of the spacecraft. I think I will leave that out, and I will leave out these buildings. I just want the ground, the spacecraft, and maybe some ground beyond the very bottom of this, like this, that sky back there. But this black or dark ground, I will just keep that going underneath. And I might upright this perspective a little bit, because I don't need for it to lean a little bit. I want it to be straight up and down. So let me get to work and try to find proportions and calculate where this thing should be, where it should start on my paper. Let me center my paper. All right. I will put the ground right about here. I have to set my image down so I can see it. Let me get my straight edge, which doubles as a maul stick, or a way of protecting the drawing and my hand from getting dirty. Okay, straight across for the ground. Now I need to measure these proportions. I'll just use my pencil from fin left and right. Okay, I have a better idea. Okay. I noticed that if I measure the base of these lower fins from left to right, and then use that same measurement and measure from the bottom of the fins upward along the spacecraft, okay, this line, oops, gotta get that measurement again, I lost it. Okay, whoop. Huh. I have to be careful how I touch my tablet. Okay, I noticed that if I take this left and right measurement of these bottom fins, rotate it 90 degrees and use that for a vertical measurement from the base of those fins up to this area. I keep taking my fingers off. That's not good. Okay, I gotta remember to keep them on. This line right here, do that again. I come up just above the bottom of these upper fins. So the width of this, I can now see. The width of this distance from this fin to this fin at the base, if you double that, you will get right about here. So I could use that calculation to make this look like an accurate drawing of this photograph that's been zoomed into or kind of cropped. So let me go ahead and get those dimensions down, those proportions. So I try to stand my image up. Okay. All right, let me take a, let me see how this will work. If I take this distance for the bottom fins, double that. Let's see if this will work. I'll put a faint little line down here. I have to see if I'm in range. I don't want it going off the page. Okay, let me double that. 1, 2. Okay, that's doubled of that distance. Let me mark it. Now, that means fins will be here. The body of the craft will be around here. And then these upper fins will be up there. And since it's kind of like the nose is kind of like a triangle up here. Here's a center point about. It looks like there will be plenty of room on top to, I'm going to readjust this camera a little bit. Looks like there will be plenty of room for the nose cone up here. All right, so let me get those. Let me draw a center line, and I don't want it to lean like it's slightly, like the slightly distorted perspective in the photograph because of the camera lens. Let me measure this side here, and let's see if my vertical line is calibrated. It looks like it leans a little bit to the right, so I'll move it over a little tiny bit. You can use whatever's in your hand to make measurements for your drawing, what's before you, to get an accurate drawing. So I'd say the center line's here on top, center line's there on the bottom. Of course, now I've moved the center line over, which is probably off of these this distance here, so I'm gonna take this. I gotta find the center of this. Okay, let me see. I'm gonna take this and try to find about halfway. Let's see if this is half from that center line over to here. Nope. Got to take a little bit more. Okay, put my finger on the center there, move it over. Yeah, that looks about right. So I just move this over to here. That's the right fin, and this will be the left fin. Okay. Better check again. Doesn't hurt to double, triple check. Oh. Okay. Halfway there. Halfway to this line. Let me check these. Let me double that again to make sure we're in the ballpark, so to speak. There's one. Measurement up. Let me take it up again. Whoa. that has raised up a little bit. Somehow I've made those bottom fins larger. But I think it'll still work. I think I'll still be able to get that nose up here. It's kind of basically a right angle from the tip downward, including the upper fins. So now we have the straight line up and down. Okay, got the proportion of the fins left and right. And the width of this spacecraft is going to diminish a little bit as it goes, as we draw it upwards, because of the perspective, as I mentioned before. The camera is not looking from the center point. The camera's looking down from the ground, which is down here. Therefore, the spacecraft is shaped more like this, and it's shortened a bit. If the camera were straight on, I forget what the exact term is for that, it would be perfectly the same width, up and straight up and down throughout the whole shape. But we're down on the ground with the camera looking up, and we have that. So I'm not sure if I will make measurements or if I will just kind of eye it with my eyes and just stick with that estimation. I think I'll just make a nice guesstimate, since this doesn't have to be exact. Well, it probably should. Okay, so let me think about this for a second. All right, I've noticed something with the spacecraft. See where this fin touches the cylinder of the spacecraft. The fin actually does not end here. It keeps moving upward till it touches the bottom of these upper fins. See, there's a little flare out here on this edge and this edge. Okay? So here actually is the side of the cylinder, not this outer bright area. It's actually this darker blue. Okay, so let me measure that. Oops. Let me try that again. Let me use something else to measure. Okay, there's a width of the cylinder. Now, as you can see, moving upward, the cylinder does get smaller because of the perspective, the deformation that is a result of the camera lens perspective. And how much narrower would that shape be? Let's see, here to here, about a half. I'm guessing about 1/6. Here's a half. If this side were divided into 3, which would make this 6 lines, 6 even, what's the word I'm looking for, increments, I'd say it would be about 1/6 narrower than this cylinder down here. So let me make that calculation on my paper. Geometry is a good thing to learn. Oh, well, I'm missing something entirely. I have to get the width of the cylinder itself before I can do that. So let's see if this is a half. I could use a ruler that already has increments on it, but my goal is to show people how you don't need a ruler. You can use your own sense of perception and just whatever you have before you. Okay, there's a half. Left, right fins. Halfway is, yes, the center of the cylinder. But I need to know how big the cylinder is compared to these fins. So let me, here to here is this edge of the fin to the cylinder. Yes, same. Well, no, because these are angled. And the perspective, the point of view of the camera changes the width of these. Not because they're different width, but because the camera picks up a different angle for each. These are actually symmetrical. This one would be a little shorter in width than this one over here, as you can see. Okay, there's a cylinder, there's a fin. There's the cylinder, there's a fin. This one's bigger. It must be coming back this way. Anyway, I won't get into that, but okay, let me add up these two fins. Whoa, let me try it again. I messed up the shot. Okay, two fins together are this width. All right. Now I can see that ooh, this is tough. Let me think about this. Okay, I've noticed that at the base of this spacecraft, this light that is shining, reflecting from a lamp that is obviously on the ground somewhere. This brightness, this highlight, is pretty much in the center of this main cylinder, vertical cylinder. Okay, if I take that measurement from this light to the left edge of that fin, let me check it on the right side of that highlight. Yeah, you see, that places this light right about at the center of this whole base. Okay, that to there, that to there. All right, that's good. That's about the center. Now, where do I start this cylinder as it relates to this whole width? If I take that distance from the light to the fin on either side, move it over to here, straddling that center, I find that that's the width of the cylinder at the base. So that's good. So, keeping that in mind, let me draw a little mass of highlight, which from here to here is right in the center here, okay? There's that little mass of highlight. Right there. Okay. All right, so now I have the width from the fin to the highlight, fin to the highlight. I take that over and straddle that center. Now I have the width of the cylinder from here to here. Okay, so it should look proportional. Now I know that the cylinder is this width. set my picture down. The cylinder is this width, but as it reaches this top up here, okay, I'm going to go ahead and center it because I don't want it to angle, remember? Let me take the cylinder up to this center point up here. Try to eye it, make it look centered around this line, straddle that line. Okay, if I were going to just transfer that same dimension upward, it would be this width, same as this. But we determined that this is 1/6 less distance left and right than down here. So let me reduce this by 1/6, but I still want it to straddle this center point. So that's a half. If I divide this in thirds, 1, 2, 3, I'm guessing a third is about like that. Okay, now we have, that's 1/6 less, just eyeing it, but I don't want it to lean that way along there. I want it to be centered. So I get it to where it looks centered to me. Here, where did I say that 1/6 was? And right about there. Now I have the width of the cylinder up here, just above the bottom of these upper fins. So I can go ahead and draw in the cylinder shape. I'll use my straight edge, my paint stick, or whatever else is around that's straight. If you don't have something straight, you just do the best you can. So I'll make it light as I can. This distance. All right. So now we have the basic shape of the cylinder. Let me check this. Okay. Now actually I have that way too high. I checked, remember this should be from fin to fin, double that distance. Okay, there's 1 there, 2 here. Yeah, this line here is more like where this is. The bottom of the fins, not up here. So I'm glad I checked that because I thought it did look a little too skinny. Okay, this is about where those fins are up here. All right, now the cylinder, as I said before, does not extend outward to these little flares that extrude vertically from this triangular tip of these fin forms. The cylinder is inside a little bit. So, keeping that in mind, I also notice that if I measure the width of the fin to fin on the bottom, rotate that distance 90 degrees, you see how this line here corresponds with almost the top of these fins where they stop angling into the cylinder. Just above that is where they stop. But if you take this line, move it straight without it curving up like this area does, it would go right about to where that line is that I just measured from fin to fin, 90 degrees. See that? Right there. If I measured that, went left and right, straight left and right, that point, where that meets the left part of the cylinder, would intersect with this line that extends straight up. So that's good to know. Now I know that I can make an accurate line for those fins. Okay, I go halfway up using that measurement, which is, let me check it again. My finger moved a little bit. Okay, now, but that's not good because I did not measure where that line starts. So, how do I do that? Okay, let me see if I can make a measurement of the cylinder, if I can use that from this measurement here. Okay, if I measure the cylinder down here, use that measurement, and then rotate that 90 degrees, this vertical line, the square that makes like a right angle down here on both fins at their bottom corners, that is a little more than half of that distance. So if I measure this, turn it 90 degrees, I said it would be a little more than half that distance. Here's half that distance. So I raise it up a little bit. I'll go at this point. It would be the same for both sides, straight up and down, basically. Okay. Now I use that same distance, that same vertical distance over here, right here. Okay. Maybe angling in a little bit because we know that the camera is going to distort the view of the spacecraft a little bit, making it a little smaller going up that way. So I drew these angles inward a little bit. Not too much, because the camera's still basically looking straight on this level. So these are pretty much up and down. It's when we get higher and higher that that angle gets more severe because of the camera lens perspective. All right, come back up. There we go. All right, looking good. Now I said this straight line extends about, it will intersect with the edge of these cylinders about halfway up that distance that we measured before. So let me get that drawn in. Here is that measurement we use. Rotate it 90 degrees. I'll hold my finger there where it will intersect, there and there on the other side too. Now let me make that straight line. Very lightly, because that's just a guide. All right. Now that straight line is right here, ends right there. So we know these little flares extend upward, and I don't know their proportion because they're smaller up here and then they flare out here. So this might be one of those times when I just kind of use my sense of perception and make a guesstimate, so to speak. I'm just going to add a little bit for that little flare that extends upward to these, the bottom of these top fins which are straight across from each other. Okay, I'm just going to make a little flare that goes downward. And as you can see, it's a tiny bit larger down here than up here. And I think that's too much. I think it needs to be more parallel with this cylinder line. Okay, a little better. And I'll try to make this one the same. You know, if you're drawing a circle or something, I cannot draw a perfect circle. But what I can do, similarly to what I'm doing here, I can make little guides, little guide points along the line where I want it to be. Okay, before I draw it in permanently or semi-permanently, lightly. See, that really helped. I can do that with circles too. Like here's a center point. I can see that distance, and I want it to be the same radius from this point. I just try to maintain that distance all around that point. Then, as you can see, when you draw from point to point, I could do that forever with more points, keeping them the same distance for the radius. It makes drawing a circle easier too, or any shape, using points. It's kind of got to use geometry. All right, let me think about this one. Okay, now I need to see where these lines are. How am I going to do this? This is a bit puzzling, but there's always a way to find some sort of proportion. I have not found it yet, but I'll keep trying. Let's see. Okay, that's good. I think I've found a common length that I can use to at least find the nose cone shape. If I take this distance that I've already come up with, that represents the bottom of these fins, go straight across from here to here. That distance, if I rotate it 90 degrees, will be the point of the nose cone, this point up here. So let me extend that. Here's the point, the nose cone right there. Now to me, this looks about 90 degrees, like a right angle up here. Pretty much a right angle. So how am I going to find that right angle? Well, I could just hold something up there that's pretty much a right angle, like the end of this paint stick. Try to get even here. Let me draw this lightly over here. Now I'm going to flip it over, see how it works over here. Yeah. Now let me see if this distance left to right is about the same. I have to want to keep it calibrated. I'm off a little bit. So I'm going to have, it looks like I'm going to have to rotate it like that a little bit. Okay. Now let me try that. Might have been too much. Now let me see if this is calibrated closer, more even. Yeah, I think it is. So I rotated this angle, this 90-degree angle a little bit this way. So I think I can erase this first guesstimate, and I'll go with these guidelines up here. Okay, now let's take a look at the photograph again. "90 degrees. At least that's what my sense of perception tells me. And this is not, there's some variation though. See how the bottom ends of these fins angle down a little bit. Okay. I could do a bunch of measurements and stuff, but this is kind of contained at the top. I think I can just use my artistic sense and just try to match it. Not everything has to be exact. I mean, this is pretty much in proportion now. The shape, the general shape. But here's the point, and it curves down. So I'm just going to try to guess best I can and just lightly sketch it in until it looks very close to me. Now we're going to this point and this point. Okay. And then I'd say the point of these, see the inside of these fins are completely straight because they're going to be rotating like that as the spacecraft moves and comes back to Earth to land and uses the air for drag and for maybe in some situations positioning and lift. So let me use I don't really have a straight edge, but I'd say the point where these fins begin on top is see if I go here where the flares stop. There's about halfway there. I'd say from here to here, whoops, come back here. From here to here, halfway would be right about here. But I want, it's more like a third down, a third of the way. 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, maybe a little bit higher than a third. So 1, 2, I'd say they start about here. It's going to be close enough. And if this were not a private spacecraft, but a government spacecraft, I could say it's close enough for government work. It's an old joke. All right. This is a straight line that doesn't even touch the spacecraft itself. It's on hinges, and you can see a little hinge here. it's probably a big hinge, but from here it looks like a little hinge. And it's hinged right here at the bottom where this flare comes up alongside the cylinder. Now, we'll use this 90-degree line, guideline that we made, come down, and I'd say another third from this line, horizontal line, is where this angle starts. So here's another third here. Go across. Hopefully that's straight across, left and right. And then that angles down, I don't know, what, 10 degrees maybe from vertical, 10 degrees out that way. Let me see, I'm just guessing. All right, little guidelines, light guidelines I can erase later. And then this line that extends downwards, it looks like it's about 10, 15 degrees downward. Same over here in reverse. Okay, this is not going to be perfect, of course, because it's not a perfect drawing, but we want people to see what the subject is. All right, going well here. Now, these little flares that come down and meet the top of these fins down here, you can see that here's the edge of the cylinder on the right, edge of the cylinder on the left. Here's that highlight I used for creating proportions for the picture. Now, how am I going to get this distance up here where this flare starts curving down to this position right above these bottom fins? How far is that? Well, I don't know. Let me find out. Okay, as you can see, the halfway, if I use these fins, rotate 90 degrees as we did to find about the halfway point up from here to here. That's not really going to help too much, but let me see how high this is from the bottom of these fins. Now, let me take that measurement. Rotate it 90 degrees. Haven't latched onto anything yet. As far as being able to find a dependable measurement to use. Let me think about this. I'll get back to you. Okay, I found a way to calibrate in proportion where the bottom of this flare ends and the bottom of this flare next to it ends proportionately. If I take the bottom of the spacecraft, move upward to that line where those flares end above the fins, move it up here 90 degrees. Now we've already established this shape, and this is, I think, pretty close proportionately to where the width needs to be. If I go from this corner of the bottom fin to this corner of the right bottom fin, you can see that that's pretty close, but I need to add a little bit more to get to this distance. So what I will do is I'll go from this corner to this corner and then add the width of one of these. Take that to that, add another one of these. I will have the right distance for this from here to here. So I'll go up here, left and right, add another fin width. There's my distance from the bottom of the spacecraft. To this, where the flare widens right here. There. Same over here. Okay, good. Now we can see that I'm going to move the camera a little bit, or my drawing would be better. All right, so this here, I'm going to draw that in. It actually comes out past the fin a little bit, but it curves like this. And same over here. Curves out a little bit. And just eyeing it, I think I'm off a little bit, but I can make it look a little closer. Now, here's the cylinder inside of the fin. Here's that flare that moves alongside these movable fins at the base. As you can see, this dark line, that's where this flare separates from this fin. So we go down to the bottom of this flare that we just calculated, and the width of this flare is much bigger than the width of the flare that goes up high. I'd say, I don't know, 2-3 times as wide. So we draw that in on both sides. Let me get more straight and more parallel to the shape of the cylinder. Kind of close. I'll have to fix it a little bit. Let me move this photograph off so I can draw this thing. Okay, good. Now, as you can see, it's starting to look pretty good. It's starting to look a lot like this shape proportionately. And I just used measurements from the shape itself by whatever I have. Here's my pencil mostly. You can do the same thing, whether you're standing outside watching the real thing or you're looking at a photograph. And I can do it a lot quicker if I don't have to explain how I'm doing it, of course, because then I also have to think of the words I'm going to use to be able to explain what I'm doing, which takes a lot longer. So, if you get to learn how to do this using your sense of perception and your knowledge of geometry and mathematics and science, it gets a lot quicker. All right, now we have the basic forms, and I'm going to take a tiny little break. Okay, I have the basic form of the spacecraft, the Starship, pretty much down. Now there's some detail forms that I need to record before I can start shading and doing final details. Now these lines along the bottom fins, they extend horizontally straight out, and since the camera is basically on the ground, there's not going to be much distortion as far as these horizontal lines. But as we go up along the cylinder, see how these curve, they arch up like that. Now what I'm going to do is, since I can't calculate perspective lines this way because they would go way beyond any paper I'm using, I can't draw them down. I'm going to sort of calibrate using a vertical line, which, since this side of the spacecraft is lighter, I can see these dark shadows between these panels much better than on the left side, which is in darker shadow. I'm going to draw a vertical line, then compare these angles along that vertical line of these shadows to each other. Okay, that's about, I'm going to take a sample of about 1/4 of the way from the right of the cylinder. So here, about 1/4, here's halfway, about 1/4 would be right there. Okay, this is just for calculating the angles of these curves, just at this vertical line point, all the way up and down. Now, let me try to guess. See, as we get up here, there's not too many that are visible. It's mostly down this bottom part, and they're regularly spaced. I'm going to count them. I'd say that's about 2/3 of the way up along the spacecraft, or about double the distance of the nose point of the nose cone to the bottom of these fins. Boom, boom, about double that. So boom, boom, right about here. Okay, above here I'm not too worried about these curves. These curves here. Okay, so I'm going to count them basically. I'm going to go halfway up so I don't have to count all of these. Here's about halfway. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I'll say 10. Okay, about halfway. 5 and 5 make 10. And I'm just gonna, well, let's see, this would be 12. So I'm gonna make it, I'll say, I gotta make 5 in here, so. Okay, there's 5. About evenly spaced. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As you can see, it's not perfect. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm eyeing it, using my sense of perception best I can. It's off. These are little smaller increments. So, you know, art can be guesswork, and sometimes the guesswork can be wrong. All right, these are not so critical because they're basically straight left and right anyway. So when we get up here where these flares begin, these big flares, okay, now I'm going to start looking at these angles along that area. Up here, where we ended that major set of curves, quarter in, about like this. Whoops. I'm just gonna eye those. I'll try to get those angles best I can. Just along that imaginary line, vertical line. See how they're starting to level out a little bit. I'm holding my tool on the left at that same angle along that imaginary vertical line. Boy, these are really imperfect. I think I'm goofing it up, but I'll try to make it look the best I can. See how they start leveling out as we get lower. Until they're about the same angle as these big fins, which is straight across. See how they angled more level as we go down? That's because the camera is not distorting these lines down here as much as they are up here. Okay, now all I have to do is kind of extend this curve looking at the image. I'm just going to try to balance these out the best I can. Try to keep them equidistant from each other as I go down. These are just lightly drawn in guidelines. Gradually leveling out more and more as we move downward along the vision given to us by the camera lens. And it might look the same with your eye, the lens in your own eyes, if you were standing out there in front of this spacecraft without a camera. It would probably look very similar. See how these are more level now? I'm using this angle that I came up with and just trying to extend that arch all the way across. Okay, these are basically not even visible down here. Now these lines along the fins are basically straight across, left and right. And I'm going to see how many there are. There's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So, whoa, get back up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. About like these. So, about in the same number and position as these lines on the cylinder. So I'll just extend these ends of these cylinder lines over onto the fins and just make them straight left and right. About the same incremental distance from one another. All right, now this will help make them straight very lightly. Might have to do some erasing of some of these guidelines in the future. All right, good. Now I can, these lines, segments do not exist on these flares, so I can take those out. And they do not exist on these curved lines, so I can take them out there. do some general erasing of a lot of my guidelines here that I don't need anymore. Okay. Alright, as you can see, it's getting closer. What else do I need as far as basic forms? Well, there are some lines up here that are curved, as you can see. They're just not in these equal increments, starting a third of the way down. But let me make some observations and calculations about those, and I will draw those in. Okay. I broke this into thirds. So, I'd say one of those horizontal lines there's another hinge right about 2/5 of the way up along this edge of the fin. So I'll put that in. Now from that hinge I just made to this hinge, there's a curved segment in shadow, and it would have to be more angled than this one. So I just have to draw this in, and it's more distorted, deformed from the camera perspective than this one. So it's going to be more like that instead of more level. It's going to be more curved than this. This is like this, so it's going to be a little more curved than that, because it's farther away vertically. Okay, and then there's one about halfway up, but I can tell just eyeing it that this is off. This is way off. I have to do some other, use your sense of perception to check things. Okay. Now, although this shape to me, just eyeing it, looks close enough to all this, there's something I had wrong just now. I think this curve is too fat compared to this. I think this is straighter. If I drew a straight line from the nose to this point where the flare ends, let's see how that looks. And same here. Okay. And if I make an imaginary line here, from there to there, you see how much less mass of metal is on that side as compared to this. So let me lower that amount of mass. See how this angle goes basically straight up here, and it's not so fat going up that way. Just starts curving in pretty rapidly, and it's still kind of curved until it reaches that. I'm going to have to draw these fins again, but that's okay. They're just a little too wide. The same over here. Boom, boom, boom. This one maybe is not as bad on the right side, not as fat as the left side was. So this will just take a little more modification over here. Let me erase this inside straight line. Let me make an observation here. Okay, I just measured the width of this fin here on top to this one, and the width of this fin on the left is wider than this fin, which means in relationship to the perspective of the camera, this fin over here is at a closer right angle than this one. This one is more angled away, probably, because it's not as wide as this one. So let me check. Well, I can't really do that now. Let me finish this first. Let me straighten this curve out a little bit. Take off some of the heaviness. All right, we got this hinge here back, about a third of the way down. This hinge here. Okay, then this is a straight edge from this top hinge through the center hinge down to this bottom hinge. Same here. Bottom hinge straight up to this top hinge with this hinge 2/5 of the way up along this straight line. Okay, I think that looks better. And let me check the width of this compared to this one. This one over here should be a little bit wider. And it is good. So I don't think I'll have to adjust the shape of these fins too much. I just needed to fix this curve here. I think it looks better. Right. Now I got the basic shape of the spacecraft. Or, as it's called, the spaceship. Wow, what a beautiful piece of engineering it is. And I really hope it works. I hope they work all the bugs out of it, so it will work. Right, now let me get these final little segments in here. This line and this line are about in thirds right here. There's one line that goes about halfway up at the bottom of these fins. And then if you move that into thirds, if you move this above into thirds, then you have one here, right above these hinges. Another line, another third up here, which is below these hinges. Okay, and then they curve, of course, because of the perspective, the deformation of the caused by the perspective. And then these curve too, these segments. And then there's a little vent or something right here. How far down would that be? I'd say, let's see. Oh, okay, this hole, this vent, is right between, it's halfway between the bottom of these flares and the tip of the nose. More or less, pretty close. All right, so halfway. Yeah, right about, that's about right. Looks like this line is a little bit too high. Little bit. So I'm just going to take it out. It's not necessary. Okay, halfway between these, the bottom of the flares. I'll try to get it closer. Yeah, right about there. Now, here's the center vertically. It's just off to the right a little bit, right about here. It would be on this right, just to the right of the center line, and about one segment up if you use these lines. So right about here. All right, and then there are some varied angled vertical segments here and there, and they kind of resemble bricks, brickwork. And sometimes there are no vertical lines to worry about. I'll just draw a few in that I can see before I start finishing this drawing. Most of the basic forms are calculated, and there's all kinds of streaks, which I'll get into the next time I return to this drawing. But for now, I just wanted to get the basic shape. And just as I wanted to do in the beginning, remember this leans a little bit to the left because of the camera perspective, but I wanted to show it straight up and down. So I calibrated my form more vertically. Remember the vertical line that was straight up and down instead of slightly slanted like this one. So I did what I wanted to do, and I hopefully found it to be in the same proportion as I finished these basic shapes. I think it looks pretty good. Next time I return to this drawing, part 2, I will detail it with the final details, and I don't want to draw in this big tent or building, whatever it is, or this boxy looking structure back there, or any of these things. I just want the ground below the spacecraft, and maybe some clouds back here to make it look really picturesque. All right, it's time to start finishing up with the finishing details, or the final details on this spaceship. Starship is what it's called officially. And after I finish this, I think I will put in some cloud details. Although I think I will not try to make the background gray. I will just put in some mostly detailed by way of lines, outline of these clouds. Maybe a little bit of shading into the clouds, so they can stand out a little bit against this blue sky. First, I'll get rid of some of these lines I don't need here. Try to make it look somewhat clean. Thank goodness for erasers. Throughout the composition phase, I don't think I used my maul stick at all to protect the paper, so I smeared this part of my hand all over, and even though it's not very visible, it's there. I can see it. It's a little film of graphite that dulls the paper a bit. So I'm going to get rid of that first. And from now through the end of this, I want to use my maul stick to protect the brightness of this white, because I'll need it for areas like here where there's a bright reflection. That's somewhat better. Alright, I sharpened my pencil, my graphite pencil. I like this. I like these mechanical pencils because I can take it anywhere. Once I'm done drawing, I just shove that back in here. Now, no lead to worry about, or graphite to worry about. Just drop it down when I need it. Okay. I like to use the edge. To fill in some grays. This one fin up here, it's pretty much the same. All over. Same with this one over here. It's a shiny metal and it reflects kind of a dark blue sky behind the camera. I may as well leave this here while I do some shading so we can compare. I can show you what I'm looking at as I shade it. Whoops, get back. Oh, excuse me. Alright. Oh man. Come back. There we go. There. Alright. I can do this too. There's a little bit of variation, but mostly it's the same reflected blue that comes from back of the camera here somewhere, behind the camera. Then there's this edge of the nose cone. I will clean that up a bit. And this nose is not exactly pointed. See, it's a bit rounded on top. And here I am not using my maul stick. Alright, so let's see. Not exactly pointed. Gotta round that off a bit. Then erase my pointed mistake. And then starts sloping down on the other side. A little bit of sky in here and underneath this hinge. Let's see if I can make that more visible. Drew the hinge in there more. Definitely. Have to clean this up over here. Okay. Outline these a bit. Since I'm not going to be shading the sky, I'll outline these to provide that contrast that a shaded sky would help to give. I will do this instead. There's a little bit of dark shadow underneath because there's some thickness to these fins. There's a long rectangle underneath this fin here that's blackened because it's in shadow. Same with in here. A little bit of shadow on this side of the fin, the inside of the fin. Okay, and see this blackness here? That means that, like this stick, that would be this face right here, real thin face of that side. Okay. And it's not facing towards the sky, so it's not getting any light. And then we have the top of these, what did I call these? Flares, or I forget what I called it. Anyway, let me make that more outlined a bit here. Oh. Messed that up. I let the straight edge move a bit. Okay, let me keep it where it is this time. That looks better. Same over here on this. Outline that thing. Oops. All right. And also there's a straight edge at where the body of the spacecraft meets this edge there. So slightly different shades of blue. This fin that extends all the way up is reflecting some brighter light up in the sky. So we'll leave that. And then this long line on the left is reflecting a darker sky. Or it's in shadow, I should say. It's not getting any light from our right, so let me shade that in while I'm thinking about it. It's pretty dark. And yet, the surface of this fin, you don't see lines in it. It's pretty solid, smooth as far as its shade on top of it that we see. Same with this fin over here. So I will smooth out my pencil lines that are still there. I notice here underneath that inner surface I was talking about, there's a shadow down here. So let me go over here, draw that in, darken it, that dark shadow surface. It's not exposed to as much light. Erase this little guideline I used earlier. Alright, now I'm going to start shading in this nose grayness, blue grayness. Kind of goes this gray, grayish blue, kind of goes in phases. We got this dark one here, then another one that's lighter and brighter blue, then another one that's darker blue, and then this gray swath, vertical swath, dark gray, and then there's this brighter gray, and then there's a brighter blue, and then there's a dark gray again, light gray, medium gray, then these little streaks, all kinds of variations there. So I'm going to try to just turn my pencil edge into something that somewhat expresses those variations. Let me draw on this segment where the two sections of panels come together. Okay, let's see. I can make little minor corrections over those initial outline strokes made earlier because they were not real dark. Of course, we're not going to see any color. Just trying to mimic the what I see in the photograph as far as darkness and brightness. I'll come in later with my tortillon and darken. I mean, not darken, but smooth out these areas that I'm putting down if they need smoothing. Okay, here's the lighter areas, lighter blue. Of course, it doesn't have to look exact, but like I said, I'm trying to mimic these shades so that they're very similar. Okay, there's that darker gray here, which comes to the left of this vent, is what they call it. I think it releases some sort of gas in the process of taking off, maybe. I think it's liquid oxygen and methane that they call them Raptor engines, that they burn for the propellant that pushes this thing up into the sky, and then also works as a brake, the propellant does, when it's landing. It's very, very cool. It's golden age sci-fi that's now becoming a reality. I used to see spacecraft like this in the movies that came before, science fiction movies that were made before the space race, like in the 1950s, early 1960s. There's all kinds of science fiction movies where the spacecraft look a lot like this. Good thing about shading with the side of the pencil, doing it slowly, is that the artist can put down a light shade, see how that goes, put in another light shade next to it, and just do it slowly. See how it's starting to mimic this area without any color. I'll go through and soften this pretty soon. I'm just going to do this upper half of the spacecraft. And I want to get this prominent grayish shade that moves up and down. And then about halfway up, right by the bottom of these fins, we see this kind of patch of grayness. I want to put that in here. And this is pretty bright reflection here in comparison, especially. This reminds me of using crayons when I was a child. You can do the same sort of method with crayons when you want to make a page of the coloring book look more realistic, just very gradual. And this is probably going to look a lot different as far as small details. But the big details I was worried about were the ones that describe the structure of this whole work of engineering, the basic ones. It's kind of like drawing a portrait of a person. If I get all these proportions right, such as the eyes and the nose and the mouth, if they're all in the right place, then it will look like I will have captured the essence of that person. In this case, it's not a person's face, it's the structure of the entire vehicle. It's a vehicle. All right, let me get some of these kind of non-defined horizontal strokes in here. From this valve, they're about a third. They're like three segments from here, 1, 2, 3, that go up to this area of the fins. So I'll just make thirds, 1, 2, 3, using my sense of perception. And of course, with the edge of this pencil lead, pencil graphite, we get a very nice, non-defined area of gray. I can always make it darker. It's much easier to make pencil darker than it is lighter. And once I start using an eraser, it could turn into a big mess, and I don't want to do that. I want to do this gradually. Just keep referencing the reference, this photograph. There's little grayish reflections, probably rippled metal. Rippled metal? Is that the way to describe it? Maybe. Because it's slightly, wavy on the surface here. Probably. Now, okay. It's coming along slowly, as it should. Alright, this nice little blue in here, this blue area. I'll work on that, make it look as gradual as I can, because it starts here at this seam of metals, kind of a deep blue, and then it kind of turns into a light gray. So I want to soften that as I move over to the left into the curve of this cylinder surface. And of course the tortillon will help to, the blender stump will help to soften the surface of it. Right now you can see texture in these strokes, and see how this dark gray line, it kind of it also ripples, goes to this segment, kind of goes doop, and then this one doop, and then there's a segment here, separation, and the metal has some sort of slight deformation in it, so that's what causes these variations. The metal is not perfectly straight. That's what helps give this vehicle the uniqueness, the unique personality that it has. It's just like a portrait. It has a personality. If this were all one big, long and wide piece of surface, one piece of metal, you wouldn't have these lines. It's obviously been put together. Soldered or whatever it is, whatever process they use. Oh, I'm way down here already and I didn't realize it. So I goofed up, didn't I? Yeah. Okay, here, I'm only supposed to go down to here. So I started going down too fast. Alright, let me finish this upper half of the spacecraft before I start going down. And before I put in some more defined lines that define the surface of this thing, I want to smooth out some of these strokes with my blender stump. So I just take the edge of this, the side of it. Look how it takes that texture, spreads it out. I want to darken this a little bit too. Blend that in because it's not that bright on this left side. Then once I get this texture spread out a bit, I'll go back in with my pencil to add more shading on top of this smooth metal, because you don't see the texture on this metal. It's very smooth. So I want to mimic that with my drawing here. It's getting much smoother. Okay, and this is not all white either. There's not any white until we get to this area on the right side, just to the right of this valve or vent. There's that nice blue down the center of the spacecraft, and there's a bunch of light grays over here. I can smooth this bluish gray over here, and it kind of fades into this brighter gray towards the center. Now, I've got it smoothed out a bit. I'm going to add some more texture. Try to make it look a little more like the real thing. A little more definition here on the edge and along this up and down. The seam right here. Okay. Now I'm going to start darkening in some details where needed over here. See the little shadow on this cylinder from the fin? That little dark line right there, that's a shadow caused by this fin. Okay, I'm going to try to get some of these darker surfaces shaded in here. I may go back and soften those a bit too with the blender stump. There's this kind of dark shadow right here I need to define better. Right around that seam of the cylinder and the flared edge coming up from the fins at the base of this spacecraft. Got this, and then there's this little dark gray line that kind of meanders downward. Let me get that in there. You can put a little of your own personality in there as far as these smaller details. I see a little bit of these lines inside here. Get some more of this meandering dark gray reflection. Okay, it starts meeting up with these flared fins here, and that's where I'm going to stop this detail. I'll work on the lower part in a bit after I finish up these little details on top. Not exact, I'm just trying to mimic these surface details a bit. Okay, now this one, that's about halfway up to this line. This halfway up line here needs more definition, and especially here, that line angles down. I should put that in. Okay, there's some little variations around here. It might look kind of cool if I get them in there. You know, you keep looking deeper and deeper past the details you already have in. You can often find a lot more detail embedded within those details, and that's what I'm doing now. Just to give a little bit more interest, I guess. So little gray patches there. This almost looks like it was, these vertical lines almost look like they were caused by some kind of stain, like a liquid that flowed down the side of this cylinder and stained it, but I don't think it is. I think it's more of a rippled metal that's rippled vertically instead of horizontally. I could be wrong, of course. But you see more gases coming out of this cylinder than you do liquids, as far as I do when I watch their videos. See how that's starting to look more realistic as I put in more detail. And then this kind of ends here, about in this, if we go around this vent, here's a half, here's a half. So those lines end around here. Half, half. Okay. Halves are easy. I gotta darken these. These are really dark, these segments right here. Where this thing is put together. I'll go all the way across through these other grays. Try to make it look symmetrical. And there's a nice dark one up here. Another nice dark one between them. Try to keep them equidistant from each other. Starting to get a little deformed, this line. I was curving it up too much. You may have seen that. So just kind of covering up my mistake with this dark bluish shade, which also kind of flows upward. So I'll put in some more of that dark blue shade. Give this thing a little more personality all the time. See how it's starting to mimic what I see here on the left, the photograph. Alright, now there's a lot of these lines down here which I did not draw in the first time. I'll go ahead and try to extend them without them looking too deformed. I actually go all the way to this seam. At least some of them do. Yeah, that looks better. Okay. I may go back and smooth out some of these textures as well. I just have to be careful about where they are. It's easy to, when there's a bunch of segments all put together like this, it's easy to lose track of which one is which. I can go through and start a line lightly, and then when I'm sure of it, I can keep darkening it over and over, like this one. I think it's okay. I want to darken in some of these segments. That one's off a little bit. That's what I'm talking about. It's easy to get off track. All right. I'm liking the way this is coming out here. These textures and details. See these little lines that start coming down right below this vent, right here on this right side, these reflections. I'll start meandering this one down between these little horizontal panels, metal panels. Then there's another one that starts right about here. It meanders down. And another one over here. Some little variations. And this is much darker. That needs to be much darker here. But I do it gradually, as I said, so I don't have to erase. I can do it gradually. I can put in these details and shades gradually. That way I can correct back and forth here and there until they start to all agree with each other. And that's what we want. We want harmony in all these details. We want them to be where they're supposed to be. To give whatever it is, that personality, that essence, that defines it, whatever it is, living or inanimate. All right, let me soften some areas of these textures. See, I can darken, I can put in this little shade here by just spreading some of the texture around, because there's some residue of graphite on this blender stump. Blending like this can give you a way to add shading very slowly and surely, smoothly, so it's not overdone too quickly. It's kind of like cooking too, I guess. Sometimes you have to cook something at the right temperature for a certain amount of time. Otherwise, it'll get burnt and ruined. Just keep going back and forth. See more little details that I could put in or add. I could probably keep doing this process all day for hours and hours, but that would take all day. And I don't want to do that. I want to get this finished soon. Went a little too far there, see? Gotta do it slowly, so those little mistakes can be corrected. It's kind of like being an astronaut. I used to read, I was a fan of space programs, so I would read things like astronauts who said, in space, time is your friend. The slower you do things, the more time you give yourself to avoid errors. Okay? I guess we could translate that into our daily life. If we're on if we're on the highway in our cars, if we're going too fast, what are we doing? We're taking away time to think and react. We're making our situation unsafe. Okay, and I'm using this eraser tool to come up with a little bit of negative space, which is, in this case, lighter towards this white background. All right. This bottom is pretty huge. So let me work on the left side first. Break it up into a couple little processes here. All right. Now I'm not going to show the fencing or these details, just the spacecraft itself. So let me get this edge. Goes up to this point and then angles in using my light guide outline that I made before. This here is kind of like a door on a hinge. See that darkness right there, that dark line? That's where this thing turns like a door. So we'll darken this line. I'm going to use a straight edge. To make it more exact. And then there's a straight horizontal up here, shadow. That's not very straight on this fin leading edge, so I'm gonna straighten that out with a darker line. Okay, nice little outline there. I can do that along this edge also. Straight up and down. All right, good. Now, let me start filling in some. I got these little guidelines for these segments on the fins, these bottom fins, so I'll just draw some of those in now. And you don't see them go all the way across, just where the light plays on it a certain way. Of course, that's not accurate, but I'm going to leave it because it gives us that essence I was talking about. And then there's a gap here where there is no visible segment. All right, and then see this dark, really dark gray here. I can go ahead and put that in along the seam where these lower fins attach to the cylinder of the body of the spacecraft. It's pretty dark gray, but not black, just a dark gray. And then this dark blue in here is pretty similar as far as the value. So I'll make it dark too, but maybe not as dark. There needs to be little variation so a person can see that it is different. In this case, slightly lighter shade of gray. I may leave some of these textures in because this does look, the surface of blue does have some texture in it, little spots here and there. So I will leave that. And same with here, there's some textures, some grayish textures in there. Alright, and I'm going to do this fin, sorry. Shade that in. A little bit of blue mixed with gray, but they're about the same values. So I'm not too concerned about it. There's this vertical line that moves along this, parallel this inside of the fin that I was talking about. It's like a door, and that needs to be much darker. That edge of the fin. I'll do a double line, see how that looks. Yeah, that's a lot better. And then let me make this line straighter. Okay. Go ahead and finish shading in this fin. And I said some of this was textured, but this part of this fin is very smooth. So I'm going to smooth that out with the tortillon, or blender stump is what a lot of people call it. This much lighter gray down here at the bottom. Alright, now let me move this thing over a little bit, get the center of it, this cylinder. Relocate this paper. Alright, now we can see the original and the drawing side by side. Okay, where are we? We are concerned with this area right here, the lower part of the spacecraft. And I'm going to go ahead, extend this vertical line down where the seam is, the body of the spaceship, and this right fin. I'll do the fin last. Okay, now, I'm not sure what these oval shapes are. I don't know if that's, it might be part of the body itself. It's got little roundish ovals or spherical shapes that extrude out of this base. So I'll just kind of suggest that they're there. I'm not really sure if I should, but they're so symmetrical. I think they are part of this, the body of the spacecraft. So I'll just I won't define them too much, just give them a little bit of dimensionality. Okay, and I'm going to shade this part. Now there's not a lot of horizontal segments that are too visible, so I'm not too worried about this bottom. That dark gray from above that goes pretty much all the way up and down this spacecraft. That reflection, that's what I'm doing here now. And it kind of meets up with this extruded spherical shape. There's a little dark blue that goes side by side with it down into that area. I will smooth this all out because it's not textured. It's very smooth. It's a smooth, shiny surface. You want a shiny, smooth surface when you build things that fly through the air, because all those little textured things that stick out into the air from the surface might add what is known as, in aeronautics, drag, which can slow down whatever it is that's supposed to be traveling through that air. Those little things that stick out can grab onto particles or molecules of the air and just interact with them, causing drag. Not good, not good. I guess it would apply to a ship in the ocean too. You don't see ships that have a lot of texture on their hulls. The hulls, that part, H-U-L-L. A hull is what basically floats, and then the rest of the boat sits on top of that. The hull. Anyway, a hull is usually pretty smooth too. It's smooth metal, and you see the movies or shows about these old sailing ships, Pirates of the Caribbean, for instance, where those boats would slice through the water at pretty good speed, and the hulls looked pretty smooth. They had to cut through that water without too much friction. Of course, I'm adding a little highlight or negative space here. Whoops. This reflection right there. Of course, I will tone that down a bit. There's one that kind of cuts through here too, and kind of meanders left and right a little bit. I will come back and add details around that, because right now they're too big, but they're very noticeable, so I want people to notice them. This is very bright, very bright reflection. So I just want to suggest that there is kind of a bright reflection. Along the seam down here, there's a nice reflection also that I covered up somehow. And I noticed this nice reflection here along the inside of the fin. I also covered that up. That would give this spacecraft more of a personality in this drawing. So I want to draw that out a bit, make it even more bright if I can, without erasing my guidelines. And if I put a dark line next to it, that'll contrast even more and bring that highlighted area out even more. Okay, here's this highlight here. I'm going to darken the area around it so that'll be more noticeable. Alright, and then this bright highlight right there, do the same. Adding more darkness right around it will make it more noticeable. It will stand out because of the contrast. Alright, I'm happy with that. Now, let me work these duller highlights in a bit. Try to fix that. Now let me move towards the right fin here, which is what I'm going to do now. Look at this interesting, like a zigzag texture right there in this metal. Very interesting. There was a little texture in this flared area here. I need to darken that shadow underneath, just as I did on the other side. Now here is the seam. There's a really dark area that kind of flows all the way down. I'll just make it look a little imperfect as it is in the photograph. If it's too textured, I'll just come back and smooth it first before finishing the other final details. I chose this photograph to draw because I thought it would be fun. It's fun to look at these, as far as I'm concerned, to look at these spacecraft. To me, they're works of art in themselves, works of engineering art and science, but they're so incredible. To me, it's fun to look at these, and it's also fun to draw those things that we like to look at. So next time, I'll have to find something else I like to look at that's fun to look at. Okay, there's a lot of variation in this surface right here. Very imperfect, which gives it a really interesting personality. I'd say this line is about 3/5 of the way across this cylinder from left to right. This little highlight that goes down. So if I can try to estimate fifths in this distance, I'll know where this highlight is, and it's right below these fins. Got to give yourself points of reference. So that's how I think. I divide things up into segments, equal segments, as equal as I can. So if that's middle, or half, or 2/4, add a little bit more for a fifth. Okay, there's that fifth right there. And that is a nice bright reflection, a kind of outline around it. And it kind of goes one horizontal segment at a time. So I'll make one there, I'll make one here, I'll make one here. Things like that give personality to an inanimate object like this. This is a lot more interesting than one. It's just one solid piece of metal. It looks rougher and tougher. Kind of a rough and tough personality. And since I did this, I noticed that this, well, no, that one's all right. That one does go about where it's supposed to. I've made it too far to the right, this dark gray. But I can kind of fade it over, kind of fudge it, so to speak. Kind of fake it, because it's not too far out of whack. But this brightness from that line I just determined kind of goes upward a while, so I'm gonna make that kind of bright up here. Now I gotta finish this area here. These gray lines coming down, I think here it is here, meets up with this one, kind of at the edge of these flared fins, and meanders down alongside this gray, lighter gray, little streaks in it too, here and there. Let's give it more personality. I'm going to have to smooth some of this texture in this pencil. There's kind of a tan color here too, grayish tan, which is interesting. And then you got these streaks that come down from up here, caused by like ripples in the vertical ripples imperfections in this metal, I think. I think that's what it is. It's my guess. Okay, now, about halfway down the fin is this grayish swath of color. I'm going to outline around this, highlight a little bit so it's more noticeable. Give it a sharper edge. Same with this little roundish thing I thought I had in there. I don't see it too much, but I don't think it's all that important anyway. It's kind of elusive as far as being visible in the first place, so I'm not going to worry too much about it, whatever that is. Okay, pretty soon I'm going to smooth out these textures that I'm putting down, because this is not real defined down here, this area. There's all kinds of like warbling shapes and forms, and I can kind of mimic that too without being real exact, because these details are not exact in themselves. I can put a little bit of these horizontal segments in here, which are kind of straight on with the camera, so they don't curve upward. They're just kind of eye level with the camera. Don't have to worry about the curve much. And see a little bit of these horizontal segments moving across here. I just kind of suggest them. All right, now I'm going to blend in these textures a little bit to make a more smooth surface. It's kind of fun being an artist. When I was younger, if I did not really understand the physics of what I was drawing, I would try to imagine myself as whatever that surface was. Like if it was this metal, try to imagine being that metal myself. How the sun would hit me and how the shadow would fall on, which side of me, and reflections, how light would reflect off of me, and color. It's kind of a fun exercise in itself. Now, this is not going to be perfectly accurate, but that's not my goal. My goal is to try to capture the personality of this thing without using any color. That's why drawing can be so fun. It can be a challenge in itself to do that. A little more blending in horizontally. Whoop. Okay, now these zigzags over here. It's interesting zigzags. I'd say there's about 8 or 9 of them in a series, and they go down to about here, using my sense of perception. So let's see if I can come up with something that mimics that. I'll do these lines over here first. Kind of a Y shape, somewhat, on the inside. Same right below it, just a little more dark. Some darker reflections from this dark blue dawn or evening sky. Pretty dark here. Let me help darken this line. There's a vertical line next to it, so I'll draw in gradually. Try not to mess up too much. Alright, then there's these kind of squarish blue, dark blue variations. I move up and down this one surface, this flat surface, which has metal ripples in it. Then there's a nice reflection down here on the inside of this wing or fin. And that's pretty much a smooth metal surface on this fin. I'm going to darken in some of these segments though, they're pretty dark. And they vary a bit. And they vary in distance from each other too, a bit. Alright, darken in some areas along the inside of this fin. Alright, going to smooth out these textures on this smooth metal fin or wing, maybe both. Try to get a straighter edge on this thing. Alright, let me just take a look at this. Compare it to the photograph. Let's see what I just want to check it out. Okay. very bright, all up and down. I think I failed in that respect. I think I made this too gray, some of this, so I'm going to go in and lighten up some areas with my eraser to make it more. That takes up about half of this whole right side of this spacecraft. So I'm going to go in and take some of that darkness away. It's good to step back and just generally look at this work of art, just to check things out and compare it to what your goal was in the first place. If you have a goal, in this case my goal was to try to faithfully get a drawing that looked a lot like this. I still see some areas where it could stand to be lighter. And if this is too light, no problem, I will go back and add shade again. Okay, I have my areas brightened up a bit. Now it's time to go in and correct some of that over erasing. Time to put in some highlights, some accents where needed. Now I'm kind of looking at the whole thing, not these little areas. Comparing the whole image to this whole thing and just kind of I'm trying to unify the whole thing by looking at it as one whole thing now, not as little areas. That's what I do when I'm about done. Just try to consider the whole subject. See how close it is. I have not been using a mole stick. This may be needing some erasure, which I will do when I get to it. See, I'm no longer concentrating on parts of this drawing, but I'm going the whole length of it because, as I said, I'm trying to unify the image, the subject, get it all together the way it needs to be without distorting the lines and details that are already there. Maybe just add to them somehow. Give it that full character. You see how dirty I got this over here. That's pretty bad. Look at all that dirty lead up there. Dirty graphite. Because I didn't use the maul stick. Well, I guess that gray dirtiness can give the sky some of its texture. Could look at it that way, in positive fashion. Alright, now I want to try to finish the entire drawing. Zoom out a little if I can. Nothing special, I just want to get some ground in there, the ground surface, which is basically straight across, left and right. So, let me add that in. Gives a little texture. Quickly with the side of my pencil. And since this is grass and other things, I'm just going to leave that texture in there. Does not need to be smoothed. Okay, and then few little clouds back here in the sky. So about halfway up, get this one cloud shape. Does not have to be an exact copy of the one in the photograph, but I just kind of give it that same personality. Comes down to about here on the fin, and then another one next to it meanders in and out here, and then there's a little spot of cloud here and down here. Okay, and then there's a tiny bit of faint cloud right here. Same here. And over here, about halfway down the spacecraft. So I'm gonna just gray in some, as light as I possibly can and as smooth as I possibly can. Just fill in these clouds. Really thin wisps of cloud. Who knows how high up they are? 1,000 to 3,000 feet, not sure. And these down here are a little bit darker in comparison. They even add a little contrast to this side of the spacecraft, which is good. In fact, I'm going to draw in more contrast along this edge, just to give it more spark. Try to make it rounder so it doesn't look so regular. My strokes here, more natural and less manufactured. I could shade in the blue sky in back of these clouds, but there's not really any need for that. The blue sky is bright enough, and I think it would just distract from the subject, all those textures in back of it. We want the subject to stand out. Standing up here on this ground, this flat ground. Smooth them out. Okay, I'm going to balance this out with a little bit of distant cloud down here, just like in the photograph, because it looks a little odd having this big blank space over here. So I'm just going to make up my own clouds to give it a little more interest down here. And maybe some clouds down on the horizon some more. Make them less defined, all these textured lines. More wispy, more clear in some areas. Okay, there we have it, my rendition of the SpaceX Starship in gray graphite pencil. And maybe in the next few years we will start getting photographs of this spacecraft. But instead of it sitting on the surface of the Earth, maybe this will be the moon, or maybe Mars, or maybe some other body in space, asteroids, who knows. The adventures await us very soon. Thank you for watching. I'm going to get some spacey music to go along with this.